Try to went to sharper lines, but okay, let's get going. Let's just try to analyze all the games one by one, or go over them, because it's important to analyze your games. It doesn't matter you win or lose. Probably if you lose, it's even more important to go over them. So let's try to have a look. Okay, I will do like this. The first game, and it turns out to be quite important because it sets up the whole, you know, the whole atmosphere of the tournament. And unfortunately I lost it. I played against young Krzysztof Duda, and I think I got a very nice position out of the opening. It was the so-called Moscow variation, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, this structure that I got, that's what I was supposed to, that I was planning to get. And actually I've played already several games with this structure. I think it's easier to play with white a little bit. After knight e8, I had the possibility to play d4. Actually, it might be a good idea. It's not really Marozzi for the moment, right? Until I play d4. If I play d4 and black takes and I take, then we have the Marozzi setup, the Marozzi structure. But as we can see, I decided not to play. I played bishop g5, and I started, I was trying to play, I was trying to create an attack to this king, and probably that was my mistake. So this plan is not really the right one. And b5, bishop c2, but so far so good. Okay, I'm kind of improving my position little by little. I develop pieces, and here I decided to exchange the slight squared bishops. My opponent played e5, and here and in the next moves several times I had the possibility to try to break through on the queen side, and actually it was a very good idea and it was a very good plan. Why? Because my target was his king, but actually his king is quite well protected, and it I failed to create a strong attack. But at the same time, if we look at the position, I have this bishop that is kind of stuck and looking right now at his own pawns, and that's why opening up the queen side and letting this bishop go in some lines might be a good idea. And right now, right here, this b4 move is possible because of this pin. For example, if black takes on b4, I take, and if they take on c4, then this pin is really deadly. I play rook f to b1, and I'm winning here. So black cannot take on c4. They need to play a5 first to push my rook to the b1. Actually, I'm not sure if I can play rook b2, for example. Rook b2 here, unfortunately b4 will follow. So they need to push my rook away, and then I take, I play knight d5, and then I will try to prepare d4. Now, this position is about equal, but again, hello everyone. But again, I decided here my plan was all about his king and was all about creating an attack. So I played knight h2, I open up the road to the pawn, I took on g7, I played knight e2, protecting the f4 square, and finally I managed to open up the f file. I played knight f3, so far so good, and I was very happy about this position, and actually this position is better for white. But again, my plan and my eyes were all on his king and on the king side, and I just simply forgot about center and queen side. And in fact, for example, here taking on b5 and then playing either d4 or b4 would be a very good idea. For example, let's have a look. After d4 he's going to exchange, because if he takes with the pawn, I can always, you know, here I can play knight d3, or I can play rook d1 and take on d4 anyway. So it will lead to the same situation. And here I have a very nice position. His pawns are weaker. I'm going to take this pawn on d4, and then I'm going to attack on d6. And a very, very pleasant position with a small advantage for white. And here as well I could have played b4, which also seemed to be a very interesting continuation, but I played knight e2. It's not a mistake yet. Bishop b7 he played, and here again c takes b5, a takes b5, and either b4 or d4 might have posed a lot of unpleasant moments to black, and that was the way to continue the game. Instead, as I said, I tried to you know, somehow bring more pieces to the king side. Here again, I think it's the last moment where I should have taken on b4, on b5 and played b4, opening up this square for my bishop. And again, this position is more than okay for white. But I played knight to g3. All my pieces were going to the king side, knight e5, and probably it's still okay. It's still okay, but we should understand that this move, such as knight g3, is cutting, burning up the bridges, because right now I put everything on this attack, and if I fail, then well, then black probably will somehow dominate on the queen side. That's why it was very important to play rook f6 here, because actually queen takes f6 and taking these two rooks will lead to very bad position for black, because his king is very exposed. I'll play b4, then d4 will get to this king, and well, we can see that this king is weak, right? Okay, but I didn't play rook f6, and that was my problem. Actually, rook f6, for example, after knight e7, I am winning here because of queen g5 is a very strong idea, knight f5, and after rook f6, black had to be very careful. For example, they needed to play bishop c8 probably, and after queen g5, get away with the king. But then you see my pieces are getting there. They're almost by this king, and who knows, maybe my attack will prevail at some point. But unfortunately, I started maneuvering very strangely. Queen f2, bishop c8. I didn't play rook f6 again, and it was quite crucial to play. I started moving my knight. Somehow I wanted to transfer it to e3, which is quite far and unbelievable. So I lost precious time. I put away my major pieces to the king side. And again, rook f6 probably here was the last attempt to put the rook there, and knight c3, completely moving in the wrong direction. Queen g5, queen e3, while black is improving his position. He played h6, he played bishop g5, and now he's gonna transfer his knight to d4 and queen to e5, while I am doing just nothing. I'm just standing there, and after queen e5, moving the knight back to g3. Actually, he's been there. It's been there a few moves ago. Why did I go to c3 and then back to g3? Absolutely not clear. But here, knight g3 was like the final mistake of this game. I moved this knight away from the center. I let black knight get to d4, and that was over. After that, the game was over basically, so I needed to play king h1. Here the position is worse already. We're not talking about any attack, not on the king side nor on the queen side, because we see that black transfers the knight to c6, and here it controls b4 and d4 squares. So it's kind of sad what happened to the position. If we compare it with the position I had 5 or 6 moves ago, it's worse for white, but at least it's not losing. While after knight g3, the knight goes to d4, and after bishop d1, black is starting its attack on the queen side. It's almost over. And yeah, that's how I lost. That's how I lost the first game, and it was quite unfortunate, because again, I think after the opening right here, I had a very good position, and several times during this game I could have played b4 or d4, getting a very solid and a very pleasant position. And as it often happens in these tournaments, it's very important to start scoring some points. When you lose, you not only lose one particular game, but you also lose some part of your self-confidence, and that adds up as you play more games and you lose more and more, and and then it's very difficult to get away from this circle. So the first game, I lost, although I had a good position, and then I played against Levon Aronian. That was not a good game, to tell you the truth. Well, I decided to play the Caro-Kann, since Levon plays this setup quite often, this line, and I think I thought that it's a quiet line, and white, to avoid it, white is not really trying to get an opening advantage straight away. They're just, looking for long middle game, and I thought that it's exactly what I need to, and actually I didn't get any problems out of the opening, so I developed. You see that my position is quite solid, but here comes the problem. We are right now at move 13, and by the move 20, after the 20th move, I was completely lost. And white didn't do anything. They just waited for my actions, we can say. I'm not sure about my next tournaments. Let's finish with this one first. Let's try to understand what happened. Of course, if I get an invitation, I think I might accept it. I don't think I can do much worse than I did in this first one, and it was an interesting experience after all. Okay, rook f2 e8. It's okay, bishop to e3, and here I started moving my knight to d6. Maybe putting it to d7 was not such a bad idea, preparing e5, maybe even by playing f6 at certain point. For example, after knight h4, bishop e6, and f6, bishop f7 in e5 seems as a good plan to me right now. But I played knight e4, knight f to d2, and here probably putting the knight to d6 would have been a little bit safer. But e5 again, it doesn't seem as a bad mistake for the moment. Queen e2, and here I think I should have played bishop e6 and then f5, somehow stabilizing the position in the center. I might be a little worse here, but it doesn't feel so deadly yet. I played a5, I took on d4, and here the position already became quite unpleasant to play, because this bishop is on the long diagonal, this pawn is hanging all the time. I need to think about g4, and I don't know, I spent a lot of time here, and for some unknown reasons I didn't play queen to f4. I wanted to play queen to f4, and this move is kind of preparing for g4, because I want to play bishop d6 after that, and position is completely unclear. And yes, this whole I think position is worse again, but it's holdable. I can hold and I can fight. Why I didn't want to maneuver my knight to d6? No, I think, well, it's just because I thought that why should I go back with my knight if I can play e5 and solve my opening problems? Playing actively seemed to be as the right solution, but in fact it weakened my pawns and it weakened my position. So probably I should have been more careful about active play. Was recapturing with the pawn better than the bishop? At what point? I'm not sure at what point. Here, bishop takes e4. Well, I mean, after bishop takes e4, knight c5 will come anyway. I will need to retreat my bishop, and then it's an interesting question, but I'm not sure I equalize completely here. Somehow I have weak squares, and if he exchanges this dark squared bishops, this whole situation seemed to be a little bit unpleasant to me. That's why I took with the pawn, and I think it's fine, but as long as I can stabilize this whole structure and this pawn, which is quite far advanced, which could have happened after bishop e6 and f5. But instead I made a terrible move, terrible move here. I took on c5, which is absolutely incredible. And because it's almost like resigning this game. His black squares are too weak and he will just get back to d4 and somehow will bring his queen to one of the squares and the game will just be over. Impossible, I think, to hold this position anymore. So it's kind of a few wrong positional decisions here. It was not about tactics, and yeah, it led to a completely devastating effect. Thank you guys for supporting. Okay, and yeah, well, a few more moves and I lost. Yeah, and I lost. But again, this particular game was about 2 or 3 wrong positional decisions right after the opening. Then came the third game. I must tell you, for some reason, well, online it happens, but for some reason I was not happy about my overall performance because I was not really feeling that my brain somehow is in a good mood and it's performs well. I mean, I was blundering, I was making mistakes and calculations, and when you play against top players, these mistakes are very costly. I mean, these players, they know how to use even smallest mistakes. And when we talk about blunders, one blunder and the game is over. For example, this game, the third round, I played against Shahryar Mamedyarov. He chose the edgy Scandinavian defense, but I got a very good position. I got a very good position out of the opening. I was very happy. Maybe I didn't play like in the best way as white could, but anyway, I played bishop c4, I played bishop d2. I didn't quite understand his move to bishop b4. I got a pair of bishops and I played d5. I think it's the right move to play here, because he spent a lot of time moving his queen, and of course I could have just castled. And I could have continued playing this position, which is quite pleasant for me anyway. Could have played a4, b3 then, quite pleasant. But d5 is a strong move, knight b to d7, and here I should have just castled. And after castling I should have exchanged here. And look at this position. This position is, okay, it's not like a huge advantage for white, but it's very pleasant to play, it's very solid, and I can play knight e5, for example, then double my rooks on the e file or on the d file, and black will need to fight for equality for quite a long time. Instead, I decided to improve this line a little bit more, and here comes my first miscalculations. I played queen to e2, and I did not estimate what's gonna happen after castling. I didn't realize at the time when I was playing queen e2 that after castling d takes e6, bishop takes e6. If I take on e6, rook a to e8 will follow, and somehow it will give black a few tempi to attack my queen, and together with this queen on b6, which kind of attacks f2 pawn, castling long side is not comfortable anymore. Is not comfortable anymore. So long side castle would still be the best option, and yeah, I'm sure that experience will means a lot, but we'll see how it will unfold. Okay, so long side castle was the best option here, but unfortunately for myself, I didn't see that. I somehow did not realize that here, if black takes on f2, I could take on c7. And if black takes on f2, again, queen takes c7, and after queen takes g2, I take on b7, and actually my position is much better here. So I needed to calculate well here and to evaluate the consequences of exchanges on c4 and then of exchanges of these pawns, of these 4 pawns, which was not obvious to me, unfortunately. That's why I took on e6. Oops. And after rook a to e8, again, I could have castled long, but here I again miscalculated, and I didn't see that after rook e4, I have a very strong rook d4 move. And the position, well, it's not worse, it's not better, it's about equal. I decided to castle short. For some reason I thought that it will be safer, maybe. It could have been. But here somehow my queen is in trouble. I mean, where to go? Because whenever I go, it's gonna be attacked either by knights or by rook. I went to c4, he played knight e4, and I should have just ignored this, I don't know, somehow. Should have ignored it, this move. I should have played rook a to d1, for example. But I played bishop d4, and after c5 I completely blundered. I mean, I played bishop e3 without realizing that the queen, black's queen, actually can take on b2. So it just demonstrates that I was completely out of shape, I mean out of my form, and I was performing poorly. And with these guys, as I said, you just... the game is over after bishop e3. I was supposed to play back to c3, and my position is a little bit worse here, but again, I lost so much time by moving my pieces strangely. And you see, move 17 and I'm already lost. So a very sad performance. Actually, I was very sad about such a poor play. And yes, I played well. After this blunder, I tried to hold the balance. Here I should have played rook c7 though, and I have some compensation for this pawn, but well, I'm a pawn down for some unknown reason. I had such a good position out of the opening, and suddenly 5 moves later I'm the one who is defending. Here after knight c4 I had a chance, which was quite difficult to spot. It was possible to take on c5. Well, these tournaments are very hard, so it's possible to play poorly. You lose one game, then you play against a very strong opponent the next game, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, anyway guys, there are a lot of propaganda in the world, and you should understand that there are always several sides, and when you support one side, you should understand that there are other sides as well. So I don't like to discuss those terrible politics, games and propaganda from both sides, but what I mean, but unfortunately it leads to situations that we're witnessing right now, which of course is terrible and unforgivable. Anyway, yeah, this game was over quite fast, although you see I tried my best to hold, but it was just too much of an advantage for black. And we come to the last game of the first day. So altogether I played 4 days. It was 4, 4, 4 and then 3 games. And the last game of this day was, well, not bad. I mean, at least I didn't blunder anything. I played black against Anish Giri. It was a long theoretical line of the so-called anti-martial. And, well, actually I blundered again, but he just didn't take my pawn. I don't know, for some reason. Here I was supposed to play f6 and then preparing knight c5. Instead I played knight c5, and after bishop takes c5, d takes c5, he could have played bishop a4 and then just take on c6, or kind of force my knight to move away and take on e5. And this pin is not dangerous, so he could have just won a pawn. Instead he played king h1, and it gave me some time to protect my pawn. And a very interesting position, a very interesting structure happened, with his pawn being quite far advanced to a5, so I can easily attack it. But at the same time my bishop is quite dull, right? All the pawns are blocked on the black squares, and it makes this position quite tricky. But I still believe it's about equal, and with accurate play from the black side it should be holdable. Here, for example, I could have just gone to take this pawn, but even winning this pawn, look at this position, white is a pawn down, but it's white who's pushing, and if he gets this pawn, then he might get to this one and then this two. So I decided not to exchange this pawn. I decided actually to exchange the queens, which is quite a tricky decision and probably is the wrong one. And the right idea might have been around might have been involving pawn sacrifice. c4, very interesting idea, with the idea just to not let this white knight get to c4. If he plays b takes c4, then b3. If he takes d takes c4, then rook e7 and rook d8. And yes, white has an extra pawn, but again, this pawn on a5 can easily be attacked. And the same idea, maybe it was even stronger. I played queen e5 to play c4 here, because after c4 here, if he takes with the d pawn, then I already have these ideas with d3 attacking the rook on a1, although it seems not possible. Yeah, I was very close to draw with Anish. I'm gonna show you how, but no. I'm attacking this pawn, and after, in case of knight d2, I have this d3 move. Okay, so c4 here would have been very, very interesting, because then, well, at least I exchange one of my weak pawns, and it's kind of better for my bishop. It was very drawish, yeah, indeed, it was very, very drawish. But again, I exchanged the queens, and this endgame is quite unpleasant, I must tell you. But I played well. Okay, I hold it there, and I almost survived. Although there was one very interesting moment in this particular situation. I played rook h5. I was very happy because about my position. I was very, very happy. because I thought that I consolidated, you know, I have this plan with transferring my rook to the h file and then play f5 and win on h4, but unfortunately he made a very beautiful move, just a very beautiful move, rook f5. It's always nice to make such moves. I reacted correctly. I took on f5 with the pawn, and after e takes f5 I went rook e2, and here unfortunately I made the blunder. I made a mistake that loses the game. The position seems to be holdable. It seems to be a draw, but you need to make it. First I needed to start with bishop c7, controlling this square, and after rook h1 I had to play rook f2, attacking the pawn on f5 and making this plan of transferring the rook to g6 to the 6th rank impossible, because after rook g6 I'm just gonna take this and take the rook, and since I'm threatening to take on f5, I mean rook e1 is possible, yeah, and probably it's like the trickiest way for white to pose some questions, but here it seems that I have enough time to counterattack, and somehow I survive here, although it's very dangerous. If white gets to this a6 pawn, then the game will be over. But again, my pieces are very well coordinated and very well placed, and yeah, it's hard to hold. This position is very hard to hold, but it's about equal. But again, one mistake and it's over, because those pawns, like in checkers, you know, they will just be lost one after another. And I took on c2, and unfortunately it's too bad. Rook g3, I played rook g1. What happened? Well, rook g6 is not okay, rook g1, and yeah, just too hard to protect from all these threats. And I lost, yeah, unfortunately I lost this game as well, so I finished this first day with 0 out of 4, with no real chances actually. I had a good chance to pose more problems to Duda in the first round, as I already explained, with c takes b5 and then b4 or d4, and I had a good chance not to blunder pawn to Mamediyarov and then to hold the position with Giri, but otherwise no, I mean, big chances. So the second day, and I hoped to play better, at least to play better, because I was not very happy of my performance, of the way I played. I know that I can play better. I mean, I can still lose even if I play well, but you know, it's a completely different feeling if you understand that, okay, your opponent was just played better than you are, but at least you did your best. And the second day, and my game against Magnus, which I was completely unhappy. I am completely unhappy about my performance in this game. Oops, no, not with easy penka yet. So with Magnus, what's going on? Okay, let me play. Yeah, okay. We transferred from the Alpine to the French defense. It's a structure that often happens in French, with the isolated pawn. And here I made a terrible move, knight d4, completely in shock, still in shock. Because I've played already like dozens of games for this position, and I know how to play with white. And knight d4 is not the way to play, because if you play knight d4, at least after castling, you're kind of almost supposed to take on c6, and at least you're playing to win this pawn, and white cannot play like this. I mean, it's too dangerous, bishop a6, rook b8. So if you're not ready to take on c6, knight d4 is just a waste of time. There are several pieces to develop. The best move right now probably is bishop g5, because I'm threatening to take on f6. And here, yes, this is another pawn. So after bishop g5, if black doesn't want to lose this pawn, they kind of need to spend time to protect it. But then, okay, then it's a different story. And I might go knight d4 at some point, but first of all, it might be with another knight and in another situation. And knight d4 is a terrible, terrible move. And here bishop e3. I don't know why Magnus didn't play knight g4. It's a mystery to me. After knight g4, the game could have been over in 15 moves. Instead, he played queen to d6, and he gave me some time to protect on g4, to protect the square. And even though my position is slightly worse here, but at least the life is not over. And I mobilized my pieces. And I almost equalized the position here, but I had to play a4. I had to start attacking this bishop and this queen side, and it's not so clear what would happen after this. Because if he plays a4, and probably he should, then I could play rook f to c1. And again, bishop c7 is not possible because of queen takes b7. And if he tries to play rook e6, I thought that that would be his intention and his plan with some kind of attack. No, guys, knight e5, knight d4 is the same story. It's just bad. You need to develop first in that position. But this attack, I mean, it's very hard to create dangerous threats. In fact, you can just move your pieces so far away that they will get stuck. And apparently I have enough power to protect my king here. So a4 and rook a to c1. Господа, эта трансляция просто на английском давно была запланирована, и никаких санкций нету. Ну, как всегда, на chess.com.ru я комментирую на русском языке. На своем личном канале чаще веду трансляции на английском. Okay, queen to b3, rook c to e8, and here I played knight to e5, which is a bad move. I decided somehow to force him to play f6 and to weaken this diagonal and to close the 6th rank, but in fact he's willing to play f6 because f6 is connected with his next move, g5, and here he's starting the attack, and attack might become dangerous. So knight e5 here is the wrong move. A is the wrong move. I needed to play a4, as I said, and the position is about equal. After knight e5, it's not so equal anymore, but again, it should be holdable. And okay, a few more good moves. Knight to d2, king to g7, and again, I had to play a4 with the idea to play a5. If he's attacking on this side, at least I have to create some counter play on the queen side. I have to do something, right? I should not just wait and see while he's improving here. And after a5, well, I mean, I can play knight f1, or I can try to exchange the queens, or but yeah, I made the move, one more terrible move in my collection. Completely wrong positional decisions to exchange here. And after this exchange, and after knight takes e4 especially, the game is just simply over. It's just over. I mean, I exchanged all the pieces that were protecting my own king side. And with this exchange, I have no power to create any counterplay. And yeah, no words. No words to explain this exchange, honestly. Just exchange everything, and well, at least here I should have tried to exchange the queens as well, because after that bishop c7, and you see that there is no way to protect my king anymore. After g3 h4 is gonna happen, and that's it. That's it. So the game was over. Unfortunately, there is no way to protect my king side after that. Well, was not happy about this game. was not happy about this game, played badly in the opening, and collapsed completely in 2 moves in this equal position, with equal chances. This should have put more pressure on the world champion. Okay, and the next game was against the current world rapid champion, Nadirbek Abdusatorov. Here I was quite happy about the opening outcome. It's a long theoretical line, so I will not comment in details. I prepared that at home, and well, unfortunately here I did not play well. So he is willing to play knight c4 with the idea to prepare b4 after that. And the computer suggests knight f6, and after knight c4, knight e8, a very strange looking move, with the idea to take on d6 with the knight. And I want to play bishop d7, then b5, a4, b5 if it will help me, or bishop c7 probably just. Instead I played rook e8, and here after knight c4 I should have gone to f8. But then here b4 he was going to play, and then d4, and it's kind of tricky. He is the one who is pushing and attacking here, and it's easier to play for white. So I had to do something more precise at this moment. And after bishop c7 I let him play b4, and I hoped actually that I will get enough compensation. So I sacrificed this pawn, and I think it was the right decision to do in a practical game. I sacrificed this pawn, and I did get some compensation, and actually I did equalize it. I did equalize the position. I won the pawn back, and here was the critical moment of the game. I should have played rook to d8. I should have played rook to d8. Well, this bishop is strong, but there is no pieces and no pawns on this diagonal, so it shoots in nowhere. And I should have played rook d8 and protect the back rank and prepare to move the knight away somewhere. Instead, I spent almost all my time and decided to go for an exchange sacrifice. I played bishop to d7, which is a good move. It would be good, but unfortunately bishop f1 is happening, and well, the fact that I went to this line, I decided to sacrifice this exchange, and here I was hoping to play queen d5. Actually it was miscalculation, but after queen d5, bishop c4, the game is over. The last chance here to complicate was to play knight g5, and the position is still very tense, because he cannot play h4, for example, because of bishop g3, because of the spin. And I am threatening in a way to play bishop e6 to attack the rook, to play bishop b6 to attack on f2. I have some threats, I have some counterplay. Of course it should not be enough. It should not be enough to equalize, but at least white had to be careful here. And with seconds on the clock, it's not so obvious. Instead I played f4, but after that it's almost resignation, because it opens up the road for his queen to the center. Isn't black okay? No, black is not okay, unfortunately. To go to b3, you mean? Well, yeah, unfortunately he's threatening to play rook e6 and then rook takes e7. So it's a threat. Maybe it was better, I mean, than what compared to what happened in the game, but I think this position is still bad. Anyway, this whole exchange sacrifice was not the right one to do, and I lost in this position quite easily already. I'm in exchange down, plus my weaker king makes this position impossible to defend. But at least there was some tension in this game, and I sacrificed a pawn and I won it back, so I was quite happy about my performance in this game. And here comes the next one, the games that I'm very sad about in this tournament, because I played against a very young and promising Russian player, Andrei Yesipenko, who did pretty well in this tournament. And I prepared this line against the Jacobiano, the Italian, that the Azerbaijan players are playing, which sacrifices the pawn. But in this game, Andrei didn't take the sacrifice. And actually, against Eric Hansen, I played the same line. He also didn't dare to take on e4. It's possible to take on e4. There's a lot of theory, of course. But Andrei played d5, which is a more quiet move. And here I played knight e4, which is not very precise, I think. Then with Eric Hansen, I played a3. But Andrei didn't play well here. To tell you the truth, he was the one playing badly. He played bishop e7. I played h3, preventing this bishop to go on g4. And I got a very, very pleasant position. I played knight e5 here, maybe bishop d2, and then with the idea to play bishop b3 and rook c1 would have been better. But again, knight e5, d takes e5, knight b4 he played. Of course, I didn't want to exchange the knights. Actually, because of this move and because of my strong bishop, the position of the king is quite shaky here. Now, king h8, rook d1, queen e8, also quite a passive move. Bishop d2 with the idea to transfer the bishop to e3 looked very strong here, and I think was the right way to proceed, but I played bishop f4, and Andrei correctly started attacking my knight and pushing his pawns, but his plan was wrong. Here he played knight c2 with the idea to transfer his knight to d4, but that is the wrong plan, because the knight on d4 actually is not on a very safe spot, because this pawn can easily be attacked. In fact, the right plan for black would have been to put the knight on d3 to play c4 and then knight d3, covering the d file with the knight, but from d3. And then the position is quite unclear. It could have continued like this. I could have sacrificed the exchange, then play knight f5. It's about equal. I mean, this position is about equal. Why not play a3? But, well, in that case, knight c2 and knight d4 will be played with some tempi, and it changes the situation, because here I play rook d2 and I am preparing for knight c2. After knight c2, I want to play rook d1, and then kind of be ready after knight d4 to have my rooks doubled on the d file. But after a3, it goes here, it goes to d4, and I cannot double my rooks because this square is already weakened. Maybe a3 is a good move, then bishop d3 anyway, because now I compare this line with the c4 and knight d3 position, and I don't like c4 and knight d3 plan. I would prefer, I think, to have the knight driven, pushing to d4, and then playing bishop d3. Maybe you're right, that a3 was the right move to proceed, but somehow I did not pay attention to, during the game, to the idea of putting the knight to d3. I thought that Andrei was going to put it to d4, and I was preparing for this knight d4 transfer. And here I was very happy. I was very happy about my position because I played bishop d3. I'm kind of threatening somewhere to play b4. So that's why Andrei played a5. I played bishop e3. And here my position is very nice. I mean, it's clear that I should win at least a pawn. For example, after knight e4, with a threat to take on f6 and on c5, I was winning a pawn. And it might have been an easier way to proceed. So that's just a position with an extra pawn. Instead, as it often happens, I was looking to his king, and I played knight h5, which is also okay. But here he played rook a6. He protected his bishop from the 6th rank quite unexpectedly. And the idea here is that after knight f6, for example, rook f6, if I take the pawn, then he's gonna grab this one. And this position is not as good as it could be. Although, I mean, you know, if I wanted just to secure a draw, to secure not to lose, it would be the easiest way to proceed here. I could have played rook d8 and then end up with this position, which is very pleasant to play. It's probably a draw, most likely, but again, I have such a domination on the 5th rank. And but I mean, it should be a draw. I made a very strong move. I made the winning move. 2 rooks usually better than a queen, but in that particular situation, it's about equal, because if I just take on f2 here, then he has queen f7 and queen takes a2, and a queen and a pawn is equal to 2 rooks. But after rook f2, yeah, I had rook d8, which I didn't notice during the game. And instead, as I said, I made the winning move. I played rook f3, which is much stronger, and it forced my opponent to make even more mistakes. Bishop e5, I took, I played rook e1, and here he played queen c5, and it's a winning position. And unfortunately, I failed to find the strongest move, which was difficult to find, to tell you the truth, but I could have played queen e4, and probably that was the easiest way to proceed, because after bishop h2, king takes h2, queen takes h5, queen takes d4, I have a very pleasant position with an extra pawn, with a weak black's king, and with a very hard fight for a draw for black. And why I didn't play queen to e4, I'm wondering. I don't know, maybe during the game I didn't realize that rook e6 is not possible because of knight f4. I don't know why. I mean, queen e4 seems to be such a natural move, attacking the square, the bishop, and if it goes away, then I can just play. I'm winning here by queen g6, by playing queen g6, threatening to play rook e8, and if the rook retreats, then I just take the bishop. The whole situation, guys, is very is insane and crazy, and I think I said what I wanted to say at the beginning of this of the show. Anyway, I played queen to d7, but unfortunately, I mean, I was preparing f4, but here rook a8, f4 doesn't work, and I saw the whole line that happened in the game, but somehow I didn't hold the pressure. I didn't I mean, I saw that this move is a bad one, but I made it anyway. Something you cannot explain. You just cracked under pressure. The flag was falling and time was running out, and I didn't find any other moves, which there are several good moves for white here. For example, queen e6, kind of forcing black to exchange. It's not winning already, but still the position is better for white. About equal, probably. But I played f4, and somehow, surprisingly, he holds. He not only holds, he wins this game, because here I don't have a perpetual. And yes, I did give a lot of checks in this game, but he did everything well. His pawn on d3 is too strong. It was supposed to get lost earlier, but in fact it just won the game. Very, 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 very unfortunate loss. Very, because I was dominating, I was winning, and instead I just lost. Okay, I even didn't make a draw. I completely lost, and I was very sad about this game. That's why in the next game against Jan Nepomniachtchi, I was completely already out of my mind. Okay, he played the King's Gambit, which was to be expected. You probably know that Jan prepared and published a course on Chessable on the King's Gambit, which is a very good course. But again, King's Gambit is a very Tricky opening, and you cannot be sad with black if white plays this king's gambit. I opted for the counter gambit, Falkbear counter gambit, and that's a long theoretical line that, okay, probably if you're playing with black here, queen d7, and then knight e6, queen e6 is like the easiest way to fight for equality, but I went to a sharper one, knight e6, queen a5. But the main idea of this whole line, of course, is to play rook a to e8. Otherwise, it just, I mean, it just, you should not play it. The other question is how to evaluate this position with queen versus two rooks. And yes, as you already mentioned a little bit before, that usually two rooks are stronger than a queen. But here, white is undeveloped. And together with this bishop, I create quite unpleasant threats to his king. So he is obliged to give up this pawn, and this position arises. And apparently, I mean, it's about equal, but black, it's harder to play with black, to tell you the truth. I need to play b5, because knight f6 is already not so precise, since my king is quite weak, and it's easier to attack and to play for white. But again, it should be easier. It should be about equal. b5 probably is the strongest move here, and again, something like this. So I mean, the position is equal, but again, there was no other choice. If I went to this line, if I went to this very sharp counter gambit line, I had no other ways than play rook a to e8 and hope that my queen will handle with these two rooks against two rooks. Instead, I played b takes to c6, and it's just resigning the game immediately. I mean, it just position with the pawn down with the weak king, and it's easier to resign here than play b takes c6. So absolutely unexplainable play. In this particular game, I was so in shock after my loss to Andrei Isipenko the game before, that I just simply resigned this game. Very sad and very unhappy about this game. But then the next day came, and I was playing against Vladislav Artemiev. It was a very difficult game, a very complicated one. I mean, I made some inaccuracies, he also made some inaccuracies, and the position remained very complex, very complex. And here it was better to transfer the knight to d3, which is not so clear why, but actually from d3 it attacks the pawn on e5, but it's hard to play knight d3. I was in a worse position, but luckily Vladislav decided to punish me straight away. Instead, he should have improved his position a little bit and then prepare for his e3 or f3 moves. Instead, he decided to play e3 straight away. He sacrificed a pawn, and I was defending well. Okay, I will not dive into complications. It was a very hard position to play on seconds, but I managed, and I stabilized the situation. I put my king on f2, I kind of blocked this pawn, and we started, at some point, we started to repeat the moves. Rook d8, rook d5, and actually black has to repeat the moves here, but of course he wanted to win. Surprise, surprise. Who couldn't? Who doesn't want to win against somebody who has 0 out of how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I had 0 out of 8 at this point. And he bluffed a little bit. He bluffed on seconds. He played knight c to d7, giving up this pawn. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for subscription. So he gave up this pawn, and I should have taken it. I just did not realize, I had about 1 minute on my clock, that actually he's not threatening to play knight f6 here, because after knight f6 I am just going to take this knight, and to take this knight and end up in the winning position. Yes, my king seems to be a little bit vulnerable, but in fact I have 2 pieces for the rook plus a pawn, and Actually, I can play as active as king e3, for example. Here my position is completely winning, and even only if I had a little bit more time to realize that knight takes a4 was the right way to continue. Instead I played queen to d2, queen to e7, and here rook to d4 was again the right move to play, protecting the pawn on e4. Instead I played queen to e3, and here again rook to d4 with the idea to play knight d5. Here what is the idea now? Rook d4. Well, that's hard. I played rook b5, but this move loses. Unfortunately, it loses. Knight d5, and yeah, c takes d5 was a little bit better because of this trick, but it's still lost. So I lost on minutes. Of course, I was quite sad to lose it this way, but at least it was a tense game. Again, I played quite well. And the next game against Vincent Keimer was also actually that's the game which I think I gave away at least half of the point. I will not I will just show like the critical moment of the game as I can see it. I didn't do my best in the opening, but he dived into complications and he didn't get here. Well, for him, the critical moment in this game was this position, which is he's better in this position, and he was supposed to play queen d4, kind of offering this queen exchange. And since I still have my bishop on c1, I'm in a worse position. Instead, he transferred his queen to f6, and it gave me time to stabilize the situation and to put my bishop from c1 to c3, which is a great square. And I'm doing more than okay in this particular moment. And I was supposed to play b5 here, and actually I was going to play, and I cannot explain why I didn't, and play rook a8. So it would allow me to exchange this double pawn to create a passed pawn here, and he was the one fighting for a draw here. It would not be that easy, but okay, probably it is a draw, right? But still, black has to be careful. Instead I played rook f1. It's a move in the wrong direction, and rook f to d1 and rook to d7. Okay, but that's the last moment to save the game. The position is still equal, but I was supposed to play queen e4. I just didn't realize, because before, like at this moment, I was not able to play queen e4 because of knight g3, but I already moved my king to g1, and here this move was possible, but I just forgot about this possibility. I play rook e1, and this one loses because of knight h4. And actually, he played here rook 6 to f7 winning for some reason. He played, of course, rook f2, and he played queen h5, creating this knight f3 threat, but it gives me some chances. I had several moves to hold, the first one being queen e7, with the idea just to take on f8, and even taking on f3 here gives an equal position. Or rook d2 was also a possibility here, and then play rook, queen takes g7 and g takes f3 and take on f2. Well, this position of course is might be losing, but at least it's not over. Queen e7 was the right move to continue. Rook d2 was a possibility. Instead I played queen e4 because I was already in set knot, and that lost the game like this beautifully. I know, but not for me. So 0 out of 10 against Niemann. It was a bad game. I mean, that's a funny variation which leads to an endgame. The position is okay, but again I had to attack. I had to play e5 f5, bishop d7, castle. Instead I play g6, but g6 is not a good move in this particular order. But here again, e5, f5, bishop d7 would give me a good position, but I just stayed, you know, I was paralyzed probably because of this 10 previous losses, and I just lost this pawn on e4 and lost the game. A very sad game, very bad one. I had I think 3 games like this during the tournament, and of course it made me very unhappy. And then the last game of the third day was against Pragnananda, and what I cannot explain, why in this position, why in this situation I didn't play knight d6. I didn't play knight d6. And if attacking the pawn on d4, and what's more important, taking under control the c8 square and not letting this rook go to c8, c5, d5 as it did in the game. And this position is quite unclear and complex and about equal. Instead I played f3, I led the rook to c8. Later, a few moves later, I played knight d6, but it's another story and another situation. Anyway, losing this game was not necessary, of course. b4 is a big mistake here, because g5 is actually putting the rook to the c file is kind of not right here, because the rook on e2, it protects the pawn on e5, and after g5 I'm ready to play f5, while when the rook is gone, after g5, f5, this pawn is hanging. So here I was supposed to play king f2, and it's still not clear, about equal, but instead I just collapsed. What to do? And another lost endgame. Although I tried to hold, but eventually he broke through. Yes, fighting spirit is the only thing that I had during this tournament. You cannot take it away from me. At least one thing that you can be sure about is my fighting spirit. I can play badly, but I'm gonna fight till the end. Okay, anyway, 3 last games of the tournament, and actually I was not I was ready to finish it on 0 out of 15. With Lekon Kliam, yeah, I played badly in the opening. Here I was supposed to play knight a5, rook c8, c5, so I made a terrible move bishop g4, then a terrible move knight d7, and when I eventually played knight a5, it was already too late, because white prepared c4, and I didn't have time to prepare c5 on my side, and I ended up in a position against 2 very strong white bishops, and the whole domination in the center from the white side, so completely lost position. So it didn't really work out, but the highlight of my tournament, I won it. I won 1 game. Well, such a relief. I know, guys, but when I was being on 0 out of 13, winning even 1 game seemed as a mystery and as something, a dream come true. Anyway, let's have a look at this one, or maybe let's have a look at the last game first, and then we'll finish the stream and this tournament with a win, right? So the last game I played against Ding Lijian, and it also didn't quite work out. Okay, out of the opening I got an okay position, maybe not the best one can get, but this position is about equal, and I make a wrong move. Knight to d5. I was supposed to play queen d7, rook f to c8, stabilize the position, maybe even go knight to e8 to protect this g7 square. And instead, of course, I'm making a move forward, but here I should have at least tried then to exchange this strong knight. Instead, I made a very bad move of 5, completely weakening this big diagonal, and it ended up quite sad. Yeah, so I lost this one. Okay, now back to the highlight of the tournament. I'm gonna show you how I won 1 game. Again, this Jacopiano, the Italian game, the lines that I already played with Tsipenka and almost won. The same d5 variation. Eric opted for the same line as as Isipenko did. So I take, I castle, and I play a3. And so I kind of push this bishop away. I try to, if it goes to e7, then I have time to some active play. Instead, yeah, black usually takes on d2 and play bishop d4, trying to use the spin to attack this pawn. But it was all prepared at home, of course. h3, bishop h5 is another possibility, and here bishop takes f3, queen takes f3. You can call it a trap, because it's, well, it's tempting to play like this when playing black, but probably it's not the right way to continue. Knight b6, bishop to d3, and knight takes d4. So it's very tempting to do like this, but unfortunately for black, I take on b7, and you see that these pawns are very weak, and my two bishops are very strong, and the only concern is that both these bishops are not protected, so I had to be very careful, and I'm quite proud that in this position I found the best way to proceed, which is queen to e3. There are several moves, of course, to make with the queen, but I think queen to e3 is the right one. The idea after rook e8 to play queen to g3, and it's quite safe here. And I think I should show you the line, like the critical line of this variation. If black plays knight to b3, like with a fork and with the attack to this bishop as well, why this line holds? Because of queen e4, counterattack. If f5, then I play queen e6 and I win this knight on b3. And if g6, then it's very important that I have rook a to d1, protecting this bishop. And after knight c5, I play queen e3 and bishop c3, and I win this knight back. So that's the line which is like crucial for this this whole idea, opening idea, and that's why it makes it possible to take on b7, because otherwise you're just losing one of these bishops. And I knew that this line is the correct one, but still in the game I needed to make sure to work out this line in my head to make sure that I'm not losing material. And I was very happy to find this line with rook a to d1 and with bishop c3 during the game, even though it was, of course, in my books, in my home preparation. But sometimes, you know, it's not possible to memorize all your opening preparation, and you need, during your game, you need to make sure that you're not blundering. Otherwise, sometimes you make moves that you think are written down in your books, and in fact, they are not. Okay, rook b8, queen e4, f5. So here I made a mistake. Well, it's very tempting to play rook a to d1. In fact, it was more, it was better to play rook f to e1, not to let black play rook e8 and kind of prepare the square for my queen. But it's a very hard move to make. Instead, I played rook a to d1, of course. But the problem here is that after knight to d5, I cannot really play queen e5 because of rook e8. That is the problem. I need to play bishop c4, king h8, queen e5, knight b6, and here I made a mistake. But like the strongest move here in this position is very beautiful, and of course it's very hard to see it during the game. I played bishop a2, which is quite understandable, but it's a bad move. It's a bad move. And the good one was bishop to h6. Very, very beautiful. When I saw this, one of the comments saying, well, bishop a2 is a mistake, of course bishop h6 needed to be played. Come on guys, bishop h6, such a move that you usually don't notice. And actually the line continues, because rook b7. Okay, here I can play bishop a2. Maybe it's like the easiest way, because after queen takes e5, rook d7 is threatening to play knight f3, and I need to see bishop g5. So the position is very complicated. Instead I played bishop a2, and I let my opponent survive and actually get a better position after knight d7, and I was very scared during the game because I saw this opportunity and I didn't know what to do here. Being a pawn down, yes, I have a compensation, I have two strong bishops, but it's clear that I am the one who will need to fight for a draw here. And of course I was very sad. But fortunately for me, my opponent Eric played rook e8, and that turns the table around. I have time to take on c5 and get back, and knight b2, yeah, rook b1, and here everything is fine. Everything is fine. I still this position is quite tense, and because my bishop on d2 is not protected, I don't have time to move it somewhere. For example, I don't know, if I play bishop e3, then knight e2 and knight c3 will follow, so I always should look out for these tricky knights and those forks. And probably queen f7 was the easiest way to continue. I played rook f2 e1. He should have played knight to e2, and the position is completely crazy with those two knights jumping around and creating threats, and on seconds it was not obvious. Rook e8. Okay. Instead he played rook e to d8, and that's not a very good move because I have time to move away my queen to protect the bishop, and take, queen takes a7. So here I have an extra pawn, and luckily for me I did not crack under pressure here. He was the one who cracked under pressure, under time pressure I mean. Rook d3, rook b8, queen c7. Well, of course he was supposed to take an a2. Actually I blundered here because I thought that I was going to take anyway to play rook d8, but in fact he has this queen g8 move, and after queen takes e2 I would need to play bishop to f4, which is a very hard move to find, with the idea, with a threat to take on b8, and then play this endgame, which is of course still better for me, but anyway, I don't know if I would be capable of finding bishop f4 here. Instead he just blundered, which to my surprise he took on f2 and just forgot about this beautiful, easy but beautiful combination. Queen takes b8 with the idea of this back rank mate. So that's it. That was a hard tournament, of course. Scoring 1 point out of 15, something that hurts a lot. But as I said, and as I mentioned earlier, I think that was quite a valuable experience to understand the level of my play, the real level of my play against the top players. And hopefully, fingers crossed, 14 lessons or even maybe 15 lessons have been learned. And yeah, time to continue as we understand and see now those chess, of course, is a very nice game, but it's not the only thing in the life. So thank you guys for your attention. I appreciate your support a lot. It's very hard times right now for all the Russian speaking players, and for of course the Russians and the Ukrainians, and fingers crossed this nightmare will be over soon and we will just continue focusing and talking only about chess tournaments. Thanks a lot again. Let me see who is streaming right now so I can send the raid. I'm going to play tonight in chess.com rapid tournaments, and actually it's a strong field every time, and I think I need to learn to play against strong opponents, and those rapid tournaments, they definitely give me an opportunity to do so. to do so.